The blue lights in your rearview mirror don't feel dramatic at first. You pull over, hands on the wheel, trying to look calm. Then you remember the pistol case in the trunk from a range trip last weekend. One small detail, like where it's stored or what you say next, can change the whole night. In the car, confusion is the real danger, not just fear, but the kind of confusion that makes good people do dumb things. You might think, it's my right, so I'm fine, and stop paying attention. But rights and rules live side by side, and the gap between them is where trouble starts. Stay with me on this one, because by the end you'll see the map more clearly. Not a map of politics, but a map of how the system actually works. That map helps you stay lawful, stay calm, and avoid mistakes you can't rewind. And it matters even if you don't own a gun, because these rules show up in real life. A lot of people carry one big misunderstanding around like a heavy backpack. They think the Second Amendment is a simple yes or no. Either guns are allowed or they aren't, and that's the whole story. That's not how the United States is built, and it's not how gun laws work. The Second Amendment is one short sentence, but it sits inside a huge country. States make many of the day-to-day rules, and cities add their own layers. Federal law also matters, and it doesn't always match local choices. So you end up with a patchwork that can feel normal at home and confusing elsewhere. Another common mistake is thinking the Constitution works like a magic shield. Like if you say Second Amendment, the situation has to end in your favor. In real life, you don't win arguments in the moment, you survive the moment. Then you deal with paperwork, policies, and people who may see things differently. It also doesn't help that gun rights gets talked about like one single thing. But owning a gun, carrying a gun, and using a gun are separate issues. The law can treat each one differently, even in the same state. So someone can be legal in one area and illegal in another without realizing it. When people say, I'm legal, they often mean, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. Feeling right is not the same as being right under local rules. That's why you see stories where nobody meant harm, but someone ends up arrested. It's usually not a movie moment, it's a paperwork moment. Now let's talk about the two worlds problem, because it explains so much. World 1 is what people think the law says, based on slogans and quick clips. World 2 is what happens on sidewalks, at work, and during traffic stops. The second world is full of gray areas, and gray areas don't care about your intent. In the first world, the Second Amendment sounds like a clean promise, you have a right, so you should be able to exercise it without begging. That belief is part of the American story and many people share it. But in the second world, how you exercise the right matters a lot. In real life, the law asks practical questions. Is the person allowed to have a gun under federal rules and state rules? Is the gun stored the way the state requires in that setting? Is the location a place where firearms are restricted, even for lawful owners? Then there's the social side, which can be just as important as the legal side. A gun seen by the wrong person at the wrong time can create panic fast. You might not be doing anything illegal, but the call goes out anyway. And once police arrive, you're in a high-stress environment whether you wanted it or not. This is why gun law debates can feel like two people speaking different languages. One person talks about rights on paper, and the other talks about risk in public. Both are reacting to something real, and both can be partly right. The hard part is living inside the system without getting crushed by it. A major shift happened when the Supreme Court changed how courts judge many gun laws. In plain English, the court said governments can't just claim safety and win by default. They have to point to history and tradition that matches the modern rule they want. That approach is tied to a case called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. Before that shift, many laws were defended with balancing tests. That's where a court weighs the right against the government's safety goal. After Bruen, the focus leaned more toward historical comparisons. It didn't erase all gun rules, but it changed the ground under a lot of them. A simple way to think about it is this. For years, some places treated public carry like a special permission slip. If you could show the right reason, you might get approved. Bruen pushed back on that idea, saying the right can't hinge on special favors. That decision didn't end the arguments, it sped them up. States and cities started rewriting laws, and lawsuits followed right behind. Some rules fell, some survived, and many are still being tested. So the headlines keep changing, but the bigger theme is that the rules are in motion. At the same time, the Supreme Court also signaled that some limits still make sense. Even when the right is real, it's not unlimited in every place in every situation. Courthouses, secure government spaces, and certain sensitive locations come up often. So the story isn't anything goes. It's the line has to be justified. That brings us to a needed reality check. Most legal trouble doesn't come from big, dramatic events. It comes from ordinary routines, like driving across town or walking into a store. The law shows up when you least expect it, and that's why calm planning matters. Travel is one of the biggest tripwires because borders change rules instantly. Your home state might allow one style of carry, but the next state might not. Some states honor other permits, some don't, and some honor only a few. So a road trip can turn into a legal puzzle without you doing anything bad. Even if you never carry on your body, transport rules can still matter. A gun in a vehicle might be treated differently than a gun in your home. Loaded versus unloaded can matter, and so can where the ammunition sits. A glove box, a center console, and a locked case are not the same in every state. There's also a federal idea people lean on when traveling, often without understanding it. In simple terms, there's a safe passage concept for moving through places. But it has conditions, and it's not a free pass to ignore local rules while you stop. If your trip turns into a long detour, that protection may not work the way you assume. Public places are another place where people get surprised. Some states restrict carry in parks, on public transit, or near certain events. Some places have rules that change depending on whether the site is posted. And many of these rules are enforced after the fact, not explained ahead of time. Private property is its own world, and it's easy to misunderstand. A store owner can set conditions for being inside their building. If the rule is no firearms, it may not be a gun charge, it may be trespassing. Either way, you don't want a small disagreement to become a criminal case. Workplaces bring another layer, because your boss can have policies too. Some jobs ban firearms in the building, even if the state allows carry generally. Parking lots can be a special battleground depending on the state. So the rule of thumb is simple. Job policy can cost you your job even if it doesn't cost you your freedom. If you've made it this far, you're the kind of person this channel is for. We try to keep these talks calm, honest, and useful, even when people disagree. If you want more conversations like this, where we don't yell at each other, subscribe. You'll be joining a group that cares about being informed and responsible. Now let's talk about the moment that scares people the most, an interaction with police. This is not the time to prove a point or win an argument on the roadside. The goal is to keep everyone safe, including you, the officer, and anyone nearby. Your tone, your hands, and your pacing can matter as much as your paperwork. Different states have different rules about disclosure, meaning telling an officer you're armed. Some places require it, some don't, and some only require it if asked. If you guess wrong, you can create tension or even break a rule. So the smartest move is to know your state's requirement before you ever drive. Even where disclosure isn't required, you still have to think about surprises. Sudden movement toward a waistband, a bag, or a glove box can look threatening. Reaching fast because you're nervous can be misread in a second. Slow hands and clear words prevent misunderstandings better than any speech about rights. What you say matters too, because words can be sticky. If you speak in a heated way, you might sound unstable even if you're not. If you joke, you might sound careless in a serious situation. Clear and respectful is not surrender. It's basic self-preservation. Reporting and printing issues trip people up as well. In some places, showing a firearm openly can be legal, but it can still bring a call. A bystander might not know the law, and they might describe you as a threat. The problem isn't always legality, it's how fast fear travels. This is why concealment is treated like a skill, not just a choice. Poor concealment can expose the gun when you bend, reach, or hug someone. Then you're not just carrying, you're managing everyone else's reaction. And that's a responsibility people don't talk about enough. Storage at home is another quiet danger zone, especially with kids around. Even in states with weak storage rules, a tragedy doesn't care what the law says. A locked safe, good habits, and clear family rules reduce risk in a real way. And if something ever goes wrong, your choices will be judged with harsh hindsight. Alcohol and firearms are a mix that many states treat strictly. Even if your state isn't clear, common sense should be. Being impaired lowers judgment, slows reaction, and raises the chance of a bad decision. The safest plan is to separate drinking and carrying, full stop. Self-defense law is also misunderstood, and it's not as simple as, I was scared. The law usually cares about whether your fear was reasonable in that moment. It cares about whether you were the aggressor and whether you could safely avoid it, and it cares about proportionality, meaning you can't use extreme force for a minor threat. Some states have stand your ground rules, and some have stronger duty to retreat ideas. Those labels can make people overconfident, like the law gives permission to escalate. In reality, the cleanest self-defense case is the one you tried hard to avoid. Avoidance isn't weakness, it's smart risk management. Another modern complication is how laws treat people under certain court orders. For example, the Supreme Court has dealt with rules involving domestic violence restraining orders. In plain English, the court has said some restrictions can fit with the nation's history of disarming dangerous people. That discussion shows up in a case called United States v. Hemani. You don't need to memorize cases to live responsibly, but you do need to understand the theme. Rights exist, and so do disqualifiers. If someone is prohibited from possessing firearms, I didn't know, often doesn't help. So if your life situation changes, your legal situation might change too. People also get tripped up by the difference between open carry and concealed carry. Some states treat open carry as normal and concealed carry as more restricted. Other states do the opposite, because open carry can draw attention. So carry is legal here is not enough information by itself. Then there's the issue of sensitive places, which keeps expanding and shrinking in court fights. A state may say certain locations are off limits because crowds gather there. Courts may or may not agree, depending on how well the state can justify it. For you as a regular person, the safe move is to treat posted rules seriously and plan ahead. All of this can sound like a headache, so let's bring it back to something practical. You don't have to be a lawyer to lower your risk. You just have to stop relying on vibes and start relying on habits. Habits keep you steady when stress tries to take over. One habit is to avoid gray carry, where you're half sure you're allowed. Half sure is how people end up making panicked choices in public. If you're not sure, you can choose a different plan for that day. That choice can feel annoying, but it's cheaper than being wrong. Another habit is keeping your paperwork and your story clean. If you have a permit, keep it current and accessible. If you don't need a permit in your state, still know the limits and the banned places. Confidence should come from preparation, not from bravado. A third habit is learning your local rules the same way you learn traffic rules. You don't memorize the entire vehicle code before driving, but you do learn the basics that keep you from getting pulled over. Gun laws deserve the same respect, because the consequences are often heavier. Let's also talk about training, because the law is only half the picture. Safe handling matters every single day, even if you never fire a shot outside a range. Good training builds habits like muzzle control, trigger discipline, and safe storage, and those habits protect innocent people, which is the real goal. Training also helps you avoid the hero fantasy that gets people hurt. Real self-defense is messy, fast, and stressful. Even a correct choice can feel terrible afterward. So the smartest approach is to focus on avoidance, de-escalation, and safe retreat when possible. De-escalation sounds soft until you see how often it saves lives. Walking away from an argument keeps you out of a courtroom later. Letting someone have the last word protects your future. A firearm is not a tool for pride, and pride is a fast way to ruin a life. Now we can land this in a clear, safety-forward summary that fits real life. The Second Amendment is real, but it lives inside a system of federal and state rules. That system changes, and court decisions can shift it quickly. So your job is to stay calm, stay informed, and avoid turning ordinary moments into emergencies. The everyday moments are where the stakes are highest, because you don't feel ready. It's the traffic stop, the wrong turn into the wrong neighborhood, the surprise no weapons sign. It's the family gathering where someone has been drinking and tempers get short. Your best protection is not a clever argument, it's a steady plan. If you want a practical payoff from this channel, here it is. Subscribe, and you'll build a clear mental checklist for travel, vehicles, public spaces, and police interactions. You'll understand the difference between what people say online and what tends to matter in real situations. That kind of clarity helps you stay lawful and lowers the chance of a life-changing mistake. At the end of the day, the goal isn't to feel powerful. The goal is to be safe, to be responsible, and to go home without drama. Rights come with weight, and pretending they don't is how accidents happen. If you choose to own or carry, choose to be the calmest person in the room. So think back to that traffic stop at the start. Nothing about it had to be a big event. It only becomes one when confusion, pride, or sloppy habits take control. Stay steady, stay lawful, and treat every ordinary moment like it deserves care.